Welcome everybody for tonight's meeting of the Planning Committee. Firstly, I'd like to go to part one public session, which is to approve the minutes of the last meeting. Has everybody had the opportunity to read those minutes? If so, can I have a show of hands or aye, please? All those in favour? Thank you very much. Item 2, apologies. I've got one apology, which is Councillor Val Chapman. Diane, Councillor Wendy Sutton, and Carol, have you got any further apologies?
I've received apologies from Councillor Burnett, Harper Wallace and Kelly.
Okay, thank you very much. We next go then to item 3, which is declarations of interest. Now, I need to declare a declaration for the first application, which is on the screen, which is the Upper Latherford Farm, Latherford. The reason I'm declaring my declaration is that the applicant has offered a community fund to the parish council, Sharesville Parish Council, and I am the chairman of that parish council. So that it looks completely transparent, I have to declare an interest in this. Now, I will be speaking as the local member, but I won't be taking part in the debate and I shan't be voting. It's down to the rest of the committee. But I think Ellen would like to clarify more of this to you. Ellen.
Thank you, Chairman, through you. Just to be clear, the community fund sits completely outside of the planning process. It's not like a financial contribution that we would secure through a Section 106 agreement, for example. It sits completely outside of the planning process and it is arbitrary in terms of the decision-making process whatsoever. So you will see no conditions related to it. You will see no legal agreement recommended because it does not form part of the planning process. It's not the same as a Section 106 that has to meet the test. It's completely separate. So I just wanted to clarify that point. To recognise that the chair has declared an interest, but it's aside from the planning system. So I wanted that to be made clear. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Ellen. At that, I shall be handing over then to my Vice Chairman, Rob Duncan. So I'd like to invite Rob Duncan to the chair, please. Yep.
Thank you. The first item on the agenda then, as already sort of outlined, is for the application number 23/00883/FULM Major. And this is for Net Zero 12 Limited, Upper Latherford Farm. I'd like to ask Helen now to introduce this application. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. I'm going to pass that over to Tom Nutt, who's going to present. Thank you.
Hello, Tom Nutt, Assistant Team Manager, Development Management. I'll just take you through the application. The application is at Upper Latherford Farm, Latherford Lane. Planning permission is sought for a battery energy storage system, together with associated infrastructure, site levelling works, site access, landscaping and ancillary works. As you can see on the screen, we've got the location plan. It shows the application site, red line boundary, which comprises 3.3 hectares of arable land, which is part of the wider area of agricultural land associated with Upper Latherford Farm. Access to the farm is from Latherford Lane to the east of the site. The site surroundings are generally characterised by agricultural land and associated buildings. The Staffordshire and Worcestershire Canal bounds the site to the west. The wider area of the surrounding uses include an aggregates quarry and the M6 motorway to the east. Four Ashes Industrial Park is located to the northwest and Calf Heath to the north. Go to the next slide, which shows the site layout plan proposal. Site would comprise battery storage units with associated inverters and cabinets, a water tank and substation, including a brick-built control room. The site would be enclosed by a mixture of acoustic fencing on the western side, 4 metres in height, and palisade fencing, 2.4 metres in height. Beyond the fencing, hedgerow planting is proposed adjacent to the Staffordshire and Worcestershire Canal. This is shown on this plan, but is more clearly shown on the next slide, which shows the landscape plan. Proposals would connect to the overhead line running north-south through the site. The application confirms that there is capacity in this line between the Bushbury D substation to the south, the Stafford substation to the north. The proposed access to the site is from Latherford Lane to the northeast. The access track would run along the field boundary and split into two once it reaches the proposed substation and loops around the site. The track would be of a stone aggregate construction. The next slides just show some of the photos of the site. So the photo on the left is essentially looking across what would be the battery site, and on the left-hand side is the existing landscaping adjacent to the canal. The photo on the right-hand side is looking from the other direction, back to the first photo was taken. So the canal will be on the right-hand side and the site is immediately in front. Go to the next slide. This shows the view from Latherford Lane along the field boundary of where the access track would run. So right in the distance on the horizon there, you can see a pylon and then some trees. That's where the site, the actual battery and substation would be located. Go to the next slide. Now this is the view from the canal looking to the site. So on the left-hand side, you can see there that's one view, and on the right-hand side is the view, a particularly interesting view because that shows the gap between the landscaping, the existing landscaping there. So you can see through the field, the grass field in the distance there, and that's from the footpath which is on the other side of the canal looking across. So that's the photos. In terms of the planning assessment, the storage facility, battery energy storage facility, would constitute inappropriate development in the green belt. The proposal would result in encroachment into the countryside and result in loss of openness within the green belt. In line with the NPPF, substantial weight is given to this harm to the green belt. Very special circumstances will not exist unless the potential harm to the green belt by reason of inappropriateness and any other harm resulting from the proposal is clearly outweighed by other considerations. Development would make a significant contribution to energy security by allowing surplus electricity from the grid to be stored and used when it's most needed. Government policy states that storage is needed to avoid waste, reduce costs of the electricity system and increase reliability. This national policy is apportioned substantial weight. The development would also offer an uplift in biodiversity. It's around 20% net gain in habitats and 100% net gain in hedgerows. It would also contribute to the support and diversification of the rural economy. National policy advises that development should be located where impacts are or can be made acceptable. It is considered that the location of the proposed development, together with the existing and proposed landscaping, would reduce the impact on the green belt to a limited degree of harm in the medium to long term. Additionally, whilst the proposed development will be located at the site for a number of years, it is reversible and capable of being removed from the site. The removal of the equipment and the remediation of the site to its existing use and condition after the decommissioning can be secured by condition. A 3.2 hectare area of good to high quality agricultural land would be removed from the current supply. However, it is noted that there is an ample and high quality farming land remaining around the site and within the district, and therefore this proposal is not considered to be a significant development of agricultural land, nor is it required to serve the district's food production. Without evidence to the contrary, there is no reason to believe that this land should be safeguarded for future food production. The proposal incorporates new tree planting, enhanced planting buffers and an acoustic fence. There would be a degree of harm to the enjoyment of this section of the canal by its users. This relates to noise for up to 4 hours during the daytime from the cooling fans. This is a maximum of 4 hours, so it's up to. that period, and it would likely be during the daytime. However, it is considered that the applicant, through proposing screening and an acoustic fence, has sought to reduce to a minimum potential adverse impacts resulting from noise. The resulting impact, taking into account the sound level, the duration of the noise, and the length of canal affected, not result in an unacceptable impact on the tranquility and recreational value of the canal. Taking all factors into consideration, including public representations and consultee comments, the wider environmental benefits of the development in the context of the government's national strategy of decarbonising the country's energy system are considered to clearly outweigh the harm to the green belt and the other harm identified. Consequently, the very special circumstances necessary to justify the proposal do exist. The scheme is in accordance with the development plan provisions of the NPPF. On that basis, approval is recommended, subject to conditions. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Tom. We now have one speaker only tonight with regard to this application, speaking in favour of the application, and that is Steve Goff, representing the applicant. You have 5 minutes only, and I'll be very strict on that.
Good evening, Chair. My name is Stephen Goff. I'm the Planning Director with First Waste Solar, representing the applicant this evening. Combating climate change is enshrined in UK law, national and local policy. The UK has a statutory commitment to achieve net zero carbon by 2050, and essential to this is decarbonising energy production by 2030. This requires significant expansion of wind and solar energy, which is an intermittent source. Energy storage facilities like this one store surplus grid energy when generation exceeds demand, and they're capable of rapid release when demand exceeds supply. They balance instability in the national grid electricity supply, literally keeping the lights on. They support UK energy generation and enhance UK energy security. National policy statements define energy storage as a critical national priority, and the Council's own evidence base for the local plan review highlights the need for sustained increase in battery storage to meet these targets. It's impossible for me to overstate this evening the importance of battery storage to these goals. This application was called in by Councillor Cope for the reasons set out in the officer's report, and since then we've worked hard with your officers and external consultees to improve the proposals, and there are no objections from statutory consultees, including Staffordshire Fire and Rescue and the Highway Authority. We met with Serdon and Shareshill Parish Councils. We made significant changes to the scheme, including the acoustic screen addition and changing the construction route to avoid the Shareshill village. On all counts, this scheme has been found to be robust, and this is set out in the officer report, and where appropriate, conditions are recommended. If approved, this development will provide a community benefit fund to Shareshill Parish Council of £100,000. Our approach to this site from the outset has been grid-led. We engage with the district network operator, National Grid Electricity Distribution, who identified 50 megawatts of connection capacity at Bushbury substation. For operational reasons, this connection was required via the 132 Bushbury to Stafford circuit and necessitates the site being in the Greenbelt. The network operator deemed a looped connection necessary to comply with appropriate technical engineering standards, and this necessitated a site with 2 pylon towers as close to Bushbury substation as possible. Following an extensive site search, this site was deemed to be the best location and satisfying the network operator's requirements. On noise, there have been extensive engagement with your council's environmental health officer, resulting in updated reports and supplemental technical notes, which are summarised in the officer report. The proposals have been subject to a detailed British Standard compliant noise assessment, which embodies robust worst-case scenario modelling for daytime and nighttime and weekends. And our predicted sound levels based on this worst-case scenario modelling are below the existing measured ambient sound levels in the vicinity of the site. This means that whilst it will be possible to hear sound from this development, it will form part of the ambient sound level and will not dominate it. For context, our predicted sound levels on a worst case basis equate to the sound level of moderate rainfall, or just below the sound of a domestic refrigerator. The site is in the Greenbelt as mentioned, and the impact is limited. Any harm will be outweighed by the substantial benefits accruing to this development, which constitute very special circumstances. Before I conclude, Chairman, the landowners have asked me to make a point on their behalf that this battery energy storage system will support their farming activities and help to secure the viability of this farm for the next generations. In conclusion, energy storage is critical to securing the transition to net zero carbon. This application proposes a much needed 50 megawatt battery energy storage system, which embodies safe and state-of-the-art technology. The delivery of this proposal comes with high levels of certainty. We have secured an approved grid connection with the district network operator. We have secured the land on which the infrastructure will be installed. We have strong policy support at national and local level. Your officers are recommending approval, and it's my pleasure to commend it to you. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Goff.
Thank you, Chair. Just wanted to clarify on the call-in points, please, if I may. The application is before committee because it's contrary to policy, so constitutionally that's why it's there. The comments about Councillor Cope calling it in, that relates to a call in for a potential site visit, and that was very early on in the process. So I just wanted to be clear, it's not before committee because of a call in from Councillor Cope, it's because of it being contrary to policy. But Councillor Cope will go into that in some more detail, but I just wanted to clarify that point. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Helen. Moving on, there are two local ward members, Councillor Brindle and Councillor Cope. As local ward member, Councillor Cope, would you like to speak?
Thank you, members. This application's been going on now for 9 months, 10 months, and there's been a lot of dialogue between the applicant and the two parish councils involved, the Sarden Parish Council and Shares Hill. 6 months ago, I had quite a few concerns, and that's when, if you look at my observations on page 13, I actually raised those concerns. But when I raised it, it was a different officer who's not with our authority now, but it was misconstrued. I was calling it in for a site visit, not calling it actually into committee. This application would have been called into committee anyway because it affects Greenbelt, so it would have come into to this committee anyway. So if I can just put a few observations looking at what I said 6 months ago. As I said, I've had quite a bit of dialogue, and one of the things that we were concerned at in Shares Hill was originally the construction traffic was going to have a convoy meet the construction. It was going to take 12 months where they were going to meet the construction traffic on the A460, bring the traffic through the middle of Shares Hill, which would have meant big disruption to the village for 12 months. I did then ask the applicant and the county council to reconsider this because I did feel there was an alternative route. Now, at the end of the day, the applicant acknowledged this and county, and we did change the route. So that was one positive. The next one, I've always had concern about noise on this particular development, on the impact on the canal. But the noise, I was lobbying from the applicant to put a noise attenuation fence in. That wasn't there originally, to lower the noise effect. All the other BESS applications we've had do have attenuation fences because they're near residents. There are no residents around here, but there are people that enjoy the amenity of walking the towpath of the canal. The applicant agreed and he put a 4-metre attenuation fencing. So thank you for doing that. Also, there was a concern in the eventuality of a fire. The canal is very close. Now, it's what's called fire water. When they don't catch fire very often, but should this catch fire, fire water can pollute the local water course. So the applicant then considered a container, which is agreed to, that will hold the fire water should there be a fire in the future. So that was something else that was agreed to. I was concerned about the visual effect of the substation, but again, they've spoken to our planners and agreed to put more woodland planting in. And I think that was evident in the application that it has been added. I do have concerns about this site regarding BMV, best available agricultural value land. This issue has been raised before on the other BESIs. This one is 100% BMB, so I was really concerned about that. The applicant did look at alternative sites, and I did have the feeling that some of those alternative sites could have yielded poorer quality land. However, looking at the technical argument of the applicant, the technical argument is this site was chosen because it's got a double loop, a looped connection circuit. So this one is the most appropriate because in effect there are two power pylons and it creates this double loop. I don't have the gift within me of being able to argue that technicality. So on this occasion, I have to accept that the applicant is correct, but I did have concern about BMV. And finally, I still do have concerns, as do Inland Waterways, that the noise from the battery cooling fans will disturb the tranquility of the canal. However, we have to rely on our consultees, and the two consultees in this application are our conservation officer and our environmental officer. Both have looked at this and both consider that it is acceptable. So I have to go along with that proposal. And because of my declaration of interest, I will now listen to the debate with interest, but I will not be taking part in it and I will not be voting on the application. Over to you, Mr. Vice Chairman.
Thank you, Councillor Cope. I would now like to open up this application to debate.
As usual.
Councillor Steele.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. When I read through all the documentation and the original planning application, I was somewhat alarmed at a paragraph that appears quite often. It's a paragraph that we haven't come across before. If you want to follow it, it's 4.8.3. In fact, there's two 4.8.3s under neighbouring amenity. It's the second 4.8.3. The proposed development is a 2-hour battery energy storage system. This means that the development would charge for a maximum of 2 hours and likewise discharge for a maximum of 2 hours, all within any given 24-hour period. And the final sentence is, it is within these 4 hours that noise may be emitted from the proposed development. That's not strictly true because batteries have to be kept to an ambient temperature, otherwise they don't function correctly. So that 4 hours is not a truthful statement. That's all I can say, because there are times with different atmospheric conditions, temperature-wise, when the fans will have to come in to keep the batteries in the correct condition for them to be to do the job correctly. So that sentence, that paragraph occurs quite often. So it also appears at 4.8.8 again, and this is in when we're discussing the canal towpath. It is important to note that the canal towpath is to the west of the site and so is not affected by the prevailing wind. This is likely to limit the noise impacts. Furthermore, the plant would run for a maximum of 4 hours a day, which are likely to occur during the daytime, not nighttime period. I will come on to that. The applicant has sought to reduce potential adverse impacts resulting from noise by amending the proposal to include an acoustic fence, which Councillor Cope has mentioned. Again, in response to concerns raised by parish council ward members, other things have happened. But the last sentence, this reduces the noise level further during the maximum 4 hours a day that noise may be emitted from the site. There's a lot. It is not limited to 4 hours a day. I will expand a bit on that. So, the plant will run for a maximum of 4 hours a day. By admission of this, but of the own note, fluctuating temperatures will occur. Also states that this will likely be in the daytime, not nighttime. Now, this must be an assumption. The very idea of a BESS, the idea of it is so that it can be used when other forms of renewable energy are not available. For instance, at night time, solar panels are not going to be working because they use daylight, sunlight. So therefore, it could easily and most likely that the stored energy will be required to be used during the night, e.g. when people come home from work, they plug their EV in. The demands on the grid will be quite strong. And obviously, to my knowledge, wind turbines are not turned off at night. I think they continue operating 24 hours a day. So there will still be renewable energy being produced all over the country. And so the grid will have to store some of that energy. So I think that's a conflict there. I don't agree that the batteries will be pushing the energy back into the grid only in daylight hours. And in the outline safety battery management plan at paragraph 20, it states it is envisaged that detailed battery management plan will be secured by condition. And that's also repeated in the fire safety checklist. Now, I can't see a condition in the officer's report for that. So I would like to suggest that is amended. So why is this detailed battery management plan not been included in the officer's report? Instead, we have a condition for an overarching fire safety report, which I think is condition 10, if I remember right. So that's one of the things I'd like to be included. And secondly, also, I'd like to propose the following condition to be added as per part 3 of the Constitution, which would be condition 23, or if that previous one is 23, this would be 24. No battery storage system shall be operated until a detailed battery safety management plan has been submitted and approved by Staffordshire Fire and Rescue Service and South Staffs Council. The battery safety management plan should be comprised as listed in the outline battery safety management plan, paragraph 21, with the addition of risks associated with atmospheric voltages, e.g. a lightning strike, and that should be included. And the reason for that is that would ensure compliance with EQ10, which is obviously in the council's core plan. And condition 24 or 25, depending on how many you agree to, discharge of the system into the grid system shall not take place between 10 p.m. and 7 a.m. in order to reduce the impact, primarily for the canal area, and that would comply with policy EQ9. I have great, reluctantly, we do have to have these BESS installations to decarbonise the grid. And I think this particular site is because of the proximity to the canal, is a difficult one. And can I just say that at the other paragraph 4.8.3, the MPPF paragraph 191 states it's A and B, and I'd like to read the B section. Identify and protect tranquil areas which have remained relatively undisturbed by noise and are prized for their recreational and amenity value for this reason. And I don't think in the planning balance enough weight has been put against that clause. So those are my proposals.
Thank you, Councillor Steele.
I'm not going to propose refusal.
Thank you, Councillor Steele. I'd now like Helen to respond.
Thank you, Chair. Really pertinent points there raised, Councillor Steele. I just wanted to draw members' attention to the update list that was emailed round earlier today, which did address some of those concerns that were raised by Councillor Steele when the agenda was published. So there are some comments made about the fan, because that, to be clear, is the noisy element of the BESS as proposed. It is what you are approving here is what they call a 2-hour BESS. So it is 2 hours in and 2 hours out. So the fan will physically not be running for any longer than the 4 hours, to be clear. I can understand that there may have been some confusion with the way that paragraph was worded in the report, and if that's created any uncertainty, I apologise for that. But the note that's been submitted should clarify any of those outstanding points. And to be clear, it will take power from the lines for 2 hours and put power back in for 2 hours. That's a maximum over a 24-hour period. It may be half an hour, then it stops, then another half an hour, but in total, it would only be 2 hours in, 2 hours out. So I'm hoping that note that was circulated will go some way to allay some of those concerns that were raised. And it also pointed out that in terms of noise, it was very much a kind of worst case scenario that was filtered through the noise impact assessment, and that was assessed by the environmental health officer. There was considerable pushback on noise, hence the acoustic fence going in against, and hence some rearrangement of the layout. And there's no overriding objection or concerns about noise, given the fact that it is intermittent and it's only for that period of time during the day. I just want to really crystallise as well that there is no noise receptor here in terms of residents. It is the impact on the canal towpath that we're talking about. So there's no residential gardens or bedrooms, habitable rooms of any sort that we're looking at. It's simply the tranquility that the word has been used for people using the towpath. So I'm hoping that note went some way to kind of clarify some of those points that Councillor Steele raised. I will hand over to Tom shortly about the conditions. My view would be that condition 10 already adequately covers the battery storage and safety provisions. That was the one that was recommended by the fire service, and also, as we know, they will be discharged prior to any commencement of the development. And my view on the restriction of hours in terms of the evening would be, because we don't have residential receptors, it's a canal towpath, it's unlikely to be used at that time of the day. when it's dark. So I don't think that would be reasonable and therefore meet the test in terms of what we have to ensure are met by way of condition. But I'll hand over to Tom in case he's got anything further to say to that. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Yeah, just to clarify on the conditions, so previous applications for best sites, the condition has referred to battery safety management plan. Really the only difference here is that it is just a difference in the wording of that document. It's been called a fire safety precaution statement, and the reason for that is because to really align with the fire chief's guidance, which sets out the information that would be needed, and that's the document, the name of the document that it refers to. So it goes to show that over the last year or two that it has evolved, and the guidance have evolved, and the wordings for these types of documents. So it's really to be in line with that. But if anything, it actually asks for more information, because that condition 10 states that it should be guided. The statement should be guided by the grid scale battery energy storage system planning guidance for fire and rescue services, which is published by the National Fire Chiefs Council. So it needs to be in line with that. And then obviously we've got condition 11, which includes an emergency response plan. So that covers essentially what would happen in the event of a fire, and how it would be responded to. Both those conditions have to be agreed in consultation with the fire service, and both those conditions have been agreed by the fire service as the appropriate conditions to attach to this type of application. Thank you.
Thank you, Helen. Thank you, Tom. Councillor Steele, would you like to come back?
Certainly. Thank you, Mr. Vice Chairman. The lightning strikes are not mentioned in either condition 10 or 11. And I specifically said that would satisfy EQ 10, which is about atmospheric. I haven't got the wording in front of me again. That was it's a bit similar to, I don't know, if you had a massive gas storage container somewhere, that could be affected by outside conditions, couldn't it? I'm sure that's a somewhat similar scenario as a lightning strike. Personally, I don't think those two, I'll have to agree to differ. I don't think those two conditions cover what I was suggesting. So it's, I don't know if it's up for debate. Is it up for debate, or is that, are you saying that's what, the way it's going to be?
Helen?
Yeah, just to clarify, condition 10 is quite broad. It doesn't go into the specifics of details. I mean, lightning strikes are quite bespoke, and it's not something that has been requested by the fire service. However, it is broad enough that we would make sure that all of the necessary requirements would be adhered to. I'm pretty confident that that would cover all the necessary objections and concerns. But you referred to bigger developments that would be covered by the health and safety executive, for example. The scale and the nature of this development doesn't get covered by the health and safety executive. It falls to the fire service environmental health team to make that assessment, which they have done on this application. So just to be clear. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Helen. Any further points, Councillor Steele, before we move on? Thank you. I'd like to ask Councillor Ashley to speak.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mine is primarily a comment on really the only objection that is in the report. I've noticed that the England Waters Association have objected to it on various grounds. I won't quote it because members, I'm sure, have read it. But also, of course, we've all been given this very pretty illustration of the site and so on. But one thing I've noted that in an attempt to reduce the impact and probably the noise level, there would be a tree barrier that would be grown on the edge of the canal. Now, with all due respect and looking at them, they look very much to me like deciduous trees. Now, I noticed there's been an acoustic barrier fitted around the site anyway, which will reduce the noise impact. But I would have thought that perhaps evergreen type of tree as a barrier, particularly on the canal side, would have been a more appropriate, long-lasting, even through the winter when leaves normally fall on deciduous trees, would form a more effective barrier to noise from this particular location. And I just wonder whether that's being considered, because when I read through the report, all it mentioned is trees without any specific variety. I'm just wondering again if something can be done to plant appropriate types of foliage trees so that the noise from this location could be minimised. I just wonder, Mr. Chairman, what if that's practical.
Thank you, Councillor Ashley. Helen, would you like to comment?
I think it's just worth saying that the tree planting is more about the impact on the landscape rather than noise. But I take your point that it will have an impact. The noise attenuation fence will do the hard work when it comes to that. But there is a condition related to landscaping, so there is a discussion to be had about the species, the native nature of those, and ultimately what will be provided on the site. And that's condition 8 within the proposal. So yeah, there would be some discussion in terms of those species to be had when we discharge the condition.
Thank you, Helen. Councillor Ashley, would you like to come back? Thank you very much. Are there any further comments from the floor? Councillor Davis.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just a point. I noted reading on the council website about the public responses. I believe there were 37 public responses, 31 supporting and 6 against. So that's quite a good insight as to what the local residents think about this thing. And to me, that carries a lot of weight.
Thank you very much for that. Are there any further comments that the councillors would like to make? In that case, I'd like to move for a vote. I'm looking for votes in favour of this application. Please show a show of hands, all those in favour. That's 8. So thank you very much. Those against? Those abstaining? Thank you very much for that. The application has been approved. I'd now like to hand back the chair to Councillor Cope.
Thank you, members. We now move on to the next application, which, as you can see on the screen, is 2400430 VAR. It's the former Great Wherley Community Support Unit on 156 Walsall Road. This has come back to us the second time, and I'll hand it to Ellen to explain the reason why. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. I'm going to hand that over to Mike Brown, who's going to present this application.
Thank you, Chair. Good evening, members and councillors. I'll do a bit of housekeeping before we get to the application itself. So we have an update list, which seeks to alter paragraph 2.1.3 of the officer's report, just to correct some dates that are specified in the report. The second point, I have received a note from the local ward member, which has informally raised concerns regarding the scheme's potential impact on surface water flooding, but notes that this is largely addressed by condition 2 and 6 within the officer's report. And then finally, just to advise that the application is being reported to the planning committee due to the fact that technically it and the previous application were non-compliant with policy SAD number 2, given that care facilities which the application proposes fall under class use C2 rather than the allocation which sought to develop through class use C3. So that's just standard housing type. And that's the reason why it's here for discussion tonight. So the application we have before us is made under section 73 and seeks to vary numerous conditions as detailed within the officer's report to the base planning permission, which was reference 22.0004/FUL. So the previous or base permission permitted the demolition of buildings within the site and the redevelopment thereof for the erection of a 90-bed residential care home and 32 over 55 apartments with associated car parking, landscaping and infrastructure. So the permission was granted by the committee in November 2022, with all relevant conditions now subsequently being discharged. Work is well underway on site, and as such, this base permission is now extant, which basically means that it's been legally implemented. The implications of this background is that given the application is made under section 3, the LPA will in effect be granting a new permission for the site, hence why the report's quite long, because we have to go back over all the old issues again, even though when we come to consider it, it's very important to bear in mind that we have already considered matters such as the principle of the scheme, the impact on the highway network, the impact on neighbours. We can't change a decision on those matters. All we have to do is consider what we have before us in terms of the changes. I'll go over those in a moment. So it's just those specific elements that we have to consider tonight. So the amendments that are being proposed to the permitted scheme can be summarised as follows. So originally there were 32 over 55 apartments. That remains the case, but 18 of those were 2 beds and 14 1 beds. Now it is proposed to reduce the number of 2 beds to 15 and increase the number of 1 beds to 17. This will allow for the introduction of an activity room and a overnight visitor room within the building. And to clarify, for those who don't remember, the over 55 building is the one at the back. So on the right hand side of the plan in front of us. In addition, we have the approved access has been altered to revert to where such was originally located and is currently found. This is due to the fact that it's no longer considered financially viable to relocate an underground BT chamber in the area. So, and as a consequence of that change, the retention of the access, it's resulted in the minibus lay-by and internal road network layout being slightly amended. So we have the proposed site plan up on the screen. If you go to the next, so there's the approved layout. So if we flip between the two, you can see where the change is. So over to the left-hand side, we've got the lay-by flipping from the north side of the road to the south side of the road. And you can see the access itself has moved slightly to the north, back to where it is currently. In terms of further changes, we have slight changes to the car parking layout, doesn't impact on the number of spaces provided, but it does allow for the introduction of a substation and switch room, which hopefully we've got the right plan up. Yes, we have. So that is behind the caretaker's building, which is to the north of the site. So you can kind of see it there in the middle of the car parking spaces, and that's being introduced just to provide more electricity to the site, effectively to meet its need. In terms of the car parking layout as well, we have the disabled disabled parking spaces, which are in front of the access into the building, which have been relocated slightly. So if we flip between the two, you'll be able to see that the very minor change there, they've been sort of moved a bit further across. We can go to the next. So we are on to the next two plans, which we'll flip between again and show you the changes. So these are the alterations proposed to the landscaping scheme. So we have introduced in the blue on the areas on the plan, that's a water garden. So that's new. We have minor widening of footpaths around the scheme, which has occurred following advice from the fire safety officer, and the introduction of a emergency access along emergency pedestrian access along the street, which will allow for the second point of entrance and exit from the site in case of fire. So essentially changes requested by the fire safety officer. We can go to the roof plan, please. Thank you. So on the roof of the building, it's proposed to introduce additional plant, largely 2 air conditioning units, 7 air source heat pumps, and arrays of solar panels. Go to the next slide. Thank you. So there's no particular alterations to the building itself, but I've put it there for context so you can see what it looks like. But if we carry on through, there are photographs showing the building, which is now nearing the end of construction. It's not there yet, but it's ongoing. But obviously you can see it's fairly complete. So this is a view along the Walsall Road, adjacent to the junction with Love Lane. You can see the solar panels on the roof, sort of zigzag marking along the top there. Next, please. Yeah, this is a view along Walsall Road looking north. The new pedestrian access would go where the railings are not, so that area would be changed slightly at some point. This is the view into the scheme from Walsall Road, so you can see the vehicular access as is. The minibus lay-by would go approximately where that big JCB is. And finally, we've got the view from Julian Close, looking over towards the site, and you can see the building, the roof of the building between the structures there. In terms of the amendments that are being sought, all are considered to be justified reasons and necessary, and will not impact upon the quality of the scheme. The solar panels and heat pumps will enable the developer to achieve a more sustainable built form, whilst there are no neighbour amenity or highway safety issues arising. As a consequence, it is recommended that this application be approved, subject to the conditions as recommended. Finally, it should be noted that the Section 106 attached to the base permission allows for it to be transferred automatically to any subsequent Section 73 permissions, such as this, and as such, no further action with reference to this document is necessary. Thank you.
Thank you, Mike. Members, we do have a speaker for this application. Can I invite Mr. Andy Gill of the MAC Group as agent, please? Mr. Gill, you have 5 minutes. Thank you.
Good evening, Chair, members of committee. Thank you for your time for reviewing this application for variation to number of conditions. The variations sought have been covered in the committee report, and I would like to thank the Planning Department for recommending this application for approval. As you may have noticed, the development has been implemented against the original permission, and we are working diligently in getting this scheme delivered, which will prove to be a valuable asset not only to the local community but the district as a whole. At this moment, we have completed about 80% of the main external building works. Again, the changes sought have been covered in the committee report, and I won't go over each point, but will briefly cover the key changes. Firstly, the entrances to the site required amending in order to avoid BT infrastructure. Following background discussions with BT and County Highways, it was agreed to maintain the access at its current position. County Highways have raised no objections to this application, and in fact, they have confirmed to us that the Section 278 Highways works will be concluded once this decision is issued. We have included air source heat pumps and solar panels to reduce the carbon emissions of the development and to generate clean green energy. This will allow us to improve the sustainability credentials of the site and make it more energy independent, whilst allowing us to achieve BREEAM Very Good. Please note that achieving BREEAM was not a requirement as part of this development, but we are seeking to achieve this as part of our own company's environmental responsibility ethos. In order to achieve BREEAM, alongside the equipment required to deliver this, a substation and associated switch room is required. Other changes include tweaking the hard and soft landscaping, altering the mix of the apartments and creating a separate entrance to the care home. This, alongside the other changes, have been covered in the committee report and deemed acceptable by your planning officers and statutory consultees. I would like to point out that the concern raised by the Parish Council about the number of trees being removed and the neighbour comment making the same point in the committee report. This has been reviewed by the Council's planning enforcement team, and on the 12th of July they confirmed that there was no evidence of unwarranted tree removal, and they subsequently closed the enforcement case. We diligently comply with approved details and endeavour to foster good relations with neighbours during the construction process, and no further comments have been made by neighbours since that one. Lastly, under the Section 73 application, consideration should only be given to the conditions sought to be varied. Other matters such as the principle of development or planning obligations are not to be revisited, as these have already been agreed and will continue to apply. If approved, this permission was set alongside the original permission, which remains intact and unamended. Given that the changes sought do not go to the operative part of the existing permission, and the changes sought are deemed to be acceptable by your planning department and statutory consultees, it is respectfully requested that you approve this application. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Gill. We've got two local members. I know Ellen wants to speak on behalf of Kath Berry, but Matthew, do you wish to speak? Councillor Matthew Jackson.
Yes, I was speaking to Helen earlier. I was part of the parish council when they submitted this, these comments. Although I've come into this completely open-minded, I would like to comment on the trees, which he'd mentioned. I'm not sure if this is the time to do so. Yes. I know this has gone to planning enforcement. I know that there are a number of residents still very concerned by trees which have been cut down, which they have quite clear guarantees before the development that that wouldn't be the case, and I've seen quite clear before and after photos. There's the garden of the one had a clear kind of natural barrier separating it from the development, and that has now gone, and there is a window overlooking into that garden and neighbouring gardens. So that's an outstanding concern which I have and residents have.
Thank you. Kelly, do you want to reply?
Yes, thank you. I'll pick up the enforcement point. We had an open enforcement case which we have investigated and now closed. Having done a number of site visits and taken a lot of photographs, we can't find any evidence of tree removal. What we can find evidence of, though, is some significant thinning of some of the more mature trees, the more scrubby trees, to remove lower branches. We've got quite a lot of photos of that, and it has affected the aesthetics. But we cannot find any evidence of tree stumps, or even if they remove like stumps, you can normally see it in the ground, and it's like a mat of weeds. So like I say, we have looked, we can't find that. I do accept, though, from having seen the photos as part of some complaints that have been raised, it does look a lot different. But we felt that there was no breach of the conditions because it was thinning rather than removal. That said, in this application, there is further tree planting actually proposed. I think the applicants recognise some of those local concerns. They are trying to address that, and I think it will be a case of time for that planting to establish as well. So hopefully that will still give that screening. So I hope that helps answer the queries that we've looked into on that matter.
Matthew, do you want to come back?
Yeah. What was the reason for the thinning, and also would the new trees, would that restore that natural barrier? I haven't seen where the trees are planned to be planted.
Kelly.
Thank you, Chair. It comes back to the original landscaping plan. It didn't identify specific trees. It had an area of trees to be retained. So those trees have been retained. I suspect it was for access as well, because some of the rear of the property, in terms of like work getting into it, and they were quite wide, and they seem to have thinned them that way rather than that way, if that makes sense. I don't know the full details of why. I would hate to give you the wrong answer, but what I can say from an enforcement point of view is that we have not found any evidence they haven't complied with the condition, so we couldn't take any further action on that. But I think equally it's important to note the additional tree planting, which is throughout the scheme. It's not just purely on that boundary where we have had some concerns raised. There are some there, but it is throughout the scheme to kind of give it a sort of a greener feel. But there is more going in.
Happy with that? Want to come back? Okay, thank you. Members, can I put it to the rest of you? Does anybody else want to make a comment? No? We go to the vote then. Can I have a show of hands? All those in favour of the officer's recommendation, please show. Anyone against? Any abstentions? Okay, that's carried, that's approved.